Hello, it's Amelia, but not the pilot, just Amelia, and I am here to go over the books I read in October. This is my favorite time of year. I love a spooky book. I'm definitely a mood reader, and I like to read autumn books in autumn. So, let's get into it. However, I've been very busy this month, so I'm doing a Harry Potter reread as I do every year. So I read Azkaban and Chambers this month, as you do, 2 and 3. So I read 5 books this month, so let's get into it. First off, I read Interview with the Vampire with my book club. I have wanted to read this book for ages. I love the movie. I love the new TV show. The book was not it. I know it's almost a modern classic. I know she sort of reinvented the vampire genre, if you will. But like, Jesus Christ, that book is so bad. Is Anne Rice a pedophile? Because the amount of time she sexualized young children in this book was crazy. Not only is there Claudia, who apparently is named after her dead daughter, there's something going on there. She sexualizes Claudia all the time. Claudia's supposed to be like 5 years old. And then I understand, okay, there's like the dilemma of like, oh, she's like an adult mind trapped in a young body. But why? And that's not the only instance. There's also like a moment where Lestat is like drinking on these 2 young boys, and the way the bodies are described is crazy. I thought the book overall quite boring. It's weird how it works well in a movie format and in an audiobook format. I was reading it at first and I just really wasn't liking it, but then when I started listening to it as an audiobook, it works better because that's sort of what the book is. That's the whole point of the book. The format is an interview with a vampire, right? Like, it's Louis telling his story verbally from his perspective the whole time to the interviewer guy, which is fine, but it reads really boring because it's just Louis' perspective the whole time. And then I think it's interesting in the movie and TV show how that's sort of dynamic. Like, it's interesting to go from like, okay, we're in the past reviewing what happened, to like the modern day conflict of like, is Louis going to kill this random man? And you don't know. But in the book, I feel like it's just really lost because you barely remember the interview guy is even there. Every once in a while he like says something and it's just like, it doesn't matter. And the whole plot in general, I feel like, of the book was just like going nowhere, which I think is interesting that like the movie and the TV show are almost like just the first half of the book. Also, oh god, I hated Anne Rice has no chapters. There's no chapters in the entire book. It just keeps going. And I don't understand why. Like, she could have put page breaks and chapters, but she didn't. Instead, she has, I think there's 5 parts in the book, is how it's broken up. And each part gets a little shorter. Don't know why. Doesn't really mean anything. But yeah, I just thought it was really bad. However, I have heard that the second one, the Lestat book, I think it's called The Vampire Lestat, is far more interesting and better. So I'm interested in that. I might read it or listen to it as an audiobook. But I think overall, the only reason I was like able to get through the book and didn't DNF it is because I was projecting character traits onto the characters in the book from the movie and the TV show. Like, I think the movie and TV show have done so well with the characters. The book has like, the characters are like flat. They're nothing. They have no character arcs. They're so boring. And everything I like about the characters, I think, is from the TV show and the movie. I think this is the only time that I will ever say that the TV show and the movie are better. So there's that. I had high plans for this month to read a bunch of classics, read a bunch of spooky ooky books. I did not get to read Dracula as I planned. It's sitting on my floor over there. I did not get around to it. However, I did just read Frankenstein the month before, and so now I've read Our Hideous Progeny, which has recently come out, I think, this year. It's by a Scottish author. It's queer, and it's sort of, I would say, like a Frankenstein-inspired sequel, spin-off, maybe? I don't know, because the concept is that, I don't remember any of the main characters' names anymore, as always. Our main character is the niece of Victor Frankenstein, I think was the connection. It's like her uncle was the guy who created the Frankenstein monster. And so she is a Frankenstein, but she is like an out of wedlock bastard child of a rich lady, man, I guess. It's her dad who's rich. But both her parents are dead. So she's an orphan, and she grew up in a bad household with her bitter grandma. But she is obsessed with science, and she is a learned woman, and she can't make a way for herself because she is a woman. So she ends up like marrying this other sciencey guy who they vibe together, and they both get to do science stuff together, and she still gets to go to the conferences and go to the lectures and whatever as his wife. But she's a queer woman, which you slowly learn throughout the book about. Basically, they're down on their luck. They don't have a lot of money. They're going broke because her husband makes choices, bad choices. And so now she's like trying to figure out how to save their family, their relationship, their house. And she comes across these old notebooks from her uncle. And she pieces together that he created life somehow. And so they're like, we should do that. And so this is them up in Inverness creating a dinosaur Frankenstein character. I will say the book doesn't really kick off until halfway through. The first half is really just a lot of setup. And it was good, it was fine, but it's not very fast paced, I would say, until you get to the second half when they start doing the Frankenstein stuff. There's like no Frankenstein stuff in the first half of the book. It was just like talking about her being a woman, her doing science things, her wanting more for life. But I thought it was interesting. I did think there was going to be a bit of like a Loch Ness tie-in at the end, but there wasn't. Spoilers, I guess. But that was just like my thought process. That was my prediction that didn't come true. But I did like it. I thought it was fun. It was sort of spooky. It was Frankenstein vibes, but for the girlies, I guess. I also read The Unfortunate Side Effects of Heartbreak and Magic, and I have a lot of thoughts on this one. This is a Halloween rom-com book that came out last year, I think. As you know, I love a Halloween rom-com, and I just don't know how to feel about this because I feel like it was very overly hyped for me online. I felt like everyone was reading it, everyone was talking about it, and then after it came out, I felt like I saw it got like really bad reviews, and I don't remember why, and I have not looked it up, but I thought the book was fine. It was a bit all over the place. There's a lot of different plots happening, but the main premise is that our girl, Sadie, I think her name was. Sadie, it's got lots of practical magic vibes, it's got Gilmore Girl vibes, and I would say that romance wasn't the main focus of this book, which is what I was expecting it to be, but I'm like fine that that wasn't the main focus. I thought the book was still interesting, and it focused on sort of like other types of romances and love. Which I did like, but there's just, yeah, there's so much going on. So basically, our girl Sadie lives in this hometown in Nevada, California, somewhere. I don't remember. I want to say California, but it had Maine vibes, or like Oregon. It had like woodsy vibes, which confused me a bit. But anyway, she lives in this little town with her grandma in their big house, and immediately there's lots of practical magic vibes of like, always leave rosemary by your door and lavender near the kitchen sink, or whatever they say in that movie. So there's that vibe already. And the family has a curse that they will always leave, but they'll eventually come back or something. There's a lot of like magical realism things going on. So we have like, anytime it rains, they know someone's coming to the town. She runs a cafe with her grandma, but all of the things in the cafe are sort of like witchy recipes, sort of. So it'll be like, this is chamomile tea, it's good for calming you. This is our butterscotch crumb cake, it makes you lucky, or whatever. And so I thought that was fine. It was maybe a bit too much at times. the format of the book also, in between every single chapter, is a recipe, like, from that chapter. So it'd be like, oh, she just talked about a raspberry cheesecake. And then at the end of the chapter, there's a recipe for a raspberry cheesecake. And I just was sort of like, skip. Like, why? It, like, okay, is this a cookbook or a novel? I don't know. I thought it was interesting, and it's like, okay, cool, you wanted to share some recipes, fine, but I almost felt like maybe they should just be in the back of the book, or like on the author's website. Like, I don't want those. I'm not gonna refer to this, not like, oh, I want to make a raspberry cheesecake, let me go whip out my novel and find that page. Like, it was weird. And there wasn't a table of contents or anything either, so it wasn't like you could find that easily in the book, I don't think. So anyway, I thought that was bizarre. But back to the plot. So basically, Sadie lives in this town with her grandma. She runs a cafe. The love of her life, her high school boyfriend, they broke up and he left town. And Sadie has a curse. She has magic, but she also has a curse, because that's how it works with balance and whatever. That she has her magic, but she will have her heart broken 4 times in her life, and at the end of the 4 times, something bad is going to happen. It's like, okay. So first off, her first heartbreak was this boyfriend. Then we also find out in the first couple chapters that she's a twin brother named Seth, who has also left. He just like randomly up and left the house one day and didn't come back, and has not contacted her. And the boyfriend hasn't contacted her either. So that was her second heartbreak. And then in the book, she has 2 more heartbreaks, right? Obviously, that's the setup for the plot. But there was so much going on, because not only is that happening, and within the first chapter, the ex-boyfriend comes back into town and keeps, like, hanging out with her, but then being like, I gotta tell you something. And then before he could tell her something, she, like, doesn't let him say it. And this, like, stretches on the whole book, and then at the end, whatever, you find out what it was. And then there's a whole drama with that, there's just so much going on in this book that I was like, slow down. So there's that. On top of that, the grandma is dying of cancer. The grandma that she lives with. So there's also that. On top of that, we're finding out all these weird, like, family things about, like, her twin and her. Apparently her mother, like, wasn't supposed to have children because she's too powerful, but then she got, like, roped into this romance with, like, an evil wizard that lived on the other side of town, which they never talk about again. Like, what, are there dark wizards on the other side of town? Are there other witches in town? Like, we don't know. And, like, if they knew he was a dark wizard, why did she, like, date him? Whatever. I guess they were just so in love. They would Romeo and Juliet. I don't know. So there's that. And they find out that this dark wizard basically tricked their mom into a spell that made her fertile. And then he got her pregnant, and then she had the twins. But the whole thing was like, oh, now the balance is off, because the cosmic balance, she was never supposed to have babies, and she's too powerful a witch, so both her children are going to be powerful, and we need a sacrifice. So we find out, I don't want to spoil it, but there's just crazy lore that you find out from that, like familial lore, and you're like, what is this? That's also happening. So we have ex-boyfriend back in town, Seth, the twin brother, like, nowhere to be found, but, like, is he coming back? We'll see. The grandma has cancer and is dying. Very sad, very dramatic, very problems. On top of that, the weird dramatic family lore, and on top of that all, Sadie's magic has been going, like, haywire, and it's sort of debatable, like, oh, is it because she's stressed, or is there something else happening? I don't know. So in general, the book was, like, fine, but not good, I guess. There was just a lot going on. And it definitely did have Gilmore Girls and Practical Magic vibes. But there's also just so much happening for, like, a 300-page book. Like, And yeah, we wrapped everything up, but at the same time, it was like, perhaps this should have been longer or been a couple of books. Like, what is going on? I will say though, one of the weirdest parts of it, I guess, is I'm not religious, right? This author is clearly religious, and I'm usually fine with that in books. Like, sure, do whatever you do. In this book, they go to church a lot, and they go to like church is part of their community, it's part of their weekly routine. I'm like, fine, cool, love that, great, good for you. But the author was also like, every once in a while, working in some sort of like Bible metaphor, but they're like really niche metaphors. It wasn't like Adam and Eve or like Noah's Ark or like general ones that the general populace knows just casually. They were like deep cut Bible references, and I was like, I don't know what's going on anymore. And they were also just so random. It was like a random character would be like giving someone advice, and they'd be like, well, you know, like in the passage with Mary, how she blah 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 blah, and then they like discuss that a little bit, and then we just move on, we never talk about it again. And it was just really, I felt unnecessary and a bit alienating for a reader like me who is not religious and did not know what was going on. And it's like, fine to have in a book, cool, whatever, you do you. And I get that's part of the character's personality traits and vibes, right? But I also feel like including niche Bible references without explaining them better was confusing and also like unnecessary, and it turned me off a little bit on the book. I was like, I don't really like this anymore. The vibes are bad now. What's going on? But that's just my opinion. I don't know. If anyone else read this book and felt the same, let me know. So there's that. And it wasn't very consistent either. It was like, I met maybe twice or 3 times during the book that happened. And every single time it happened, I was like, oh, we're doing this again. I don't know what's going on. So there's that. On top of that, Sadie stole a dog. And then on top of that, there's like a random spooky man appearing in the woods every once in a while. And also she has a garden that is like dying randomly, and we don't know why. I will say the spooky man and the garden were not really well explained in the end. And that sort of bothered me. It annoyed me. So anyway, there's that one. I don't really know how I feel about it still, if you couldn't tell. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't good. So, but the writing was fine. Like, I didn't have any grammatical writing problems, as I've had in the past this year. So next, I read Your Blood, My Bones, which is also a pretty new book. I chose it because I've been seeing it everywhere on the internet, and I loved this book. It was so fun. This one also has like a crazy complicated plot that I still don't really know if I fully understood, but I liked the vibes so much that it made up for it almost. So the concept is spooky house vibes, spooky forest vibes, cryptids in the wood, arcane, weird creatures, eldritch creatures. That's the vibe. Cult sacrifices. With also a little bit of sprinkling of Marauders vibes, which I will explain at the end. Okay, so the plot follows Wyatt and Peter and James. So this is a group of 3 friends, and they know each other because at Wyatt's house, Wyatt lives in Maine, in like a farmhouse in the middle of the woods, sort of large property, and her dad is a witch, and she might be also, and her mom is as well. And her dad is involved in some sort of cult stuff, and that you slowly figure out through the book. It's like obviously cult stuff immediately, but it's also just like crazy. So he's involved in some sort of cult stuff, and so every summer they're in this like farmhouse, and all of these men come to the house for the whole summer, and it's very like summer camp vibes for her and the 2 other kids that come with their parents, right? So it's Wyatt, Peter, and James. And so every summer, Wyatt, Peter, and James run through the woods, have a good time, hang out in the barn, hang out in, like, there's this old derelict church out in the middle of nowhere. They get into trouble. They have a good little time. Wyatt, how do I explain this? James is sort of like your shining knight in armor. Shining armor, knight in shining armor. Jesus Christ. Knight in shining armor type of character, which is why it felt like Marauders vibes to me, because also his name is James and the other guy's name is Peter. Don't read into that. And so, James, yeah, he's a knight in shining armor type of character. He's brave, he is annoying, he is outgoing. He's also a posh British boy. The others are all American. He's like a boarding school boy who gets into trouble, and he comes over every year for the summer. And then Peter is really quiet. He's always just sort of there. He barely talks. Like, she's always trying to talk to him, but like he really doesn't say anything, and then she gets all annoyed that he like won't answer questions and whatever. But they're all friends and they all hang out together like all summer and get into mischief and trouble. That's like the setup. So it opens with Wyatt is now living with her mother in Massachusetts in Salem, also another witchy town. Her and her mom left the dad. They now live in Salem, and it's been 5 years since she's seen or heard from Peter and James, and she's like sort of upset that they never reached out, but like also she never reached out is my opinion. I'm like, girl, it goes both ways. And so she's a little bit upset about it, but she hasn't heard from them, and all of a sudden James's dad shows up on their doorstep with like this letter and this like packet of information and whatever, and is like, hello, I'm here to let you know that your father has passed away and left you the entire farm and the cult business. And she's like, cool, great, don't like that. He leaves. So Wyatt has now decided, I guess they're all like 18 or so, like they're in high school age, maybe just graduated high school, I think is what it says. And so Wyatt takes the car and she drives down to the house for the weekend, and her plan is, or up, I guess, she's driving from Massachusetts to Maine. She drives up to the house for the weekend and she decides that she's just gonna burn it down. She said, burn this to the ground. I don't want anything to do with it anymore. Like, my dad was never there for me. Also, like, I have good memories, but also bad. And, like, leaving that 5 years ago was horrible. And she gets there and she starts, like, drenching the place in whatever, it's oil, petrol, whatever, to burn the house down. But as she's doing that, she hears someone in the house. And she's like, classic horror move. Instead of running away, she goes inside to investigate. And so she goes in and she hears it's in the basement. She goes down to the basement and she finds Peter, and he's like strung up with a bunch of branches in the basement, and she doesn't know how long he's been there. And so she's freaking out. She's like, oh my god, who put you here? Who did this to you? How do I get you out? But then she starts to realize, should I let you out? Why are you here? What's going on? And then it sort of becomes a bit of a like gothic horror with like what's going on with the house, what's going on, who do we trust, can we trust anyone? And she slowly starts figuring out that like all these years she's known nothing about what's going on. She always knew there was some sort of cult stuff going on, she always knew there was something weird going on, but she never asked questions and she never was told anything, so she never found out stuff. And all of these years crazy stuff has been going on, and other people know everything and she doesn't. So she doesn't know who to trust anymore. And so basically, I don't want to spoil it too much, but she starts getting phone calls in the house. Her cell phone won't make a call. She tries to make calls from the house phone, it also won't make a call, but she starts getting phone calls from James. He's able to get through somehow. And he's like, I'm in London, but I'm on my way, like, you need to get out of the house right now, like, do not interact with Peter, you need to get out, you don't know what's going on, you need to get out of there. And he's like, but I'm on my way, I'll explain everything when I get there. And she's like, what? And then meanwhile Peter is like, don't answer the phone, don't listen to him. It's like, who do we trust? And then we get a bunch of like flashbacks and memories and stuff of them as kids, and she's slowly putting pieces together. And I also read Yellow Wallpaper, which is like a really short little novel. It's written by a woman. It's sort of known as like a feminist book. And I've wanted to read it for years, and I finally got around to it, and it was really fun. I liked it a lot. It's really short. I want to say like maybe 60 pages, not even. And it's this woman, I think she wrote it in the 60s, maybe 50s, and it's just like the concept of how women aren't trusted to know what they're doing and what's going on with them. And it's this woman, and she's in this marriage, and she's married to a doctor, and the doctor says that she's insane, her husband, the doctor, and he knows what's best for her, so he's doing what he wants to her, basically. And he never does anything like crazy in the books, in the short story, but she, from her situation, starts to actually go insane. I thought it was really fun. It's a cute little book. It's literally a pamphlet. You should check it out. So that's what I read this month. Next month, I am planning on reading Graveyard Shift, which is what I just got it last night because I just went to MLitt's book signing in Edinburgh, which was really fun. And I am planning on hopefully reading Luckenbooth, which is what I'm currently reading. It's taken me a little bit to get through. I might read Wicked because that's coming out, and I've heard that book is insane and messed up. I want to read The Goldfinch. I was supposed to read Dracula and Bunny this past month, but I didn't get around to it. But I might do that soon. We'll see. Yeah, I don't know. I have a really long list of books that I've taken out at the library, and I can't remember what they are. Anyway, I hope you guys are reading some nice spooky books. If you have any recommendations for me, let me know down below. Thanks for watching. Bye!